So discipline isn't so much the kind of berating yourself into self-hatred, that like you're a piece of shit style approach that so many of the 75 hard Jocko Wilkins Goggins types will have you believe, right? Just be more disciplined, you weak, pathetic fucking loser. Instead, real discipline is about self-inquiry, understanding the purpose and the meaning for you in certain actions and behaviors and courses of action. You're listening to the Everyday Legends podcast, the show that is dedicated to championing everyday men and supporting you in getting more from life, love, and the everyday. I'm your host, Mike Campbell, and the aim of this podcast is pretty simple: to support you in building rock-solid foundations, legendary integrity, and kick-ass relationships, with plenty of stories, a load of lessons, and a solid dose of some loving, straight talk. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Everyday Legends podcast. I'm your host, Mike Campbell. Today I'm bringing you a solo episode, and I'm going to jump straight into what we're talking about here today, and that is discipline. You need to be more disciplined. Or do you? I don't know. Here's my really simple take, which we're going to expand on today, explore. I'm going to give you some of my education and what I have gleaned over the years, both in practice as well as working with shitloads of men who often feel like this kind of word discipline sits at the center of a lot of things for them, or at least it's the thing that we're presented by in front of our face, that we see, right? It's like the fire at the door. And the thing is, like many fires that are presented at our front door, we focus on that and we don't realize, oh, there's a fucking fire in the basement that I need to deal with. And so here's the one-liner on discipline. And that's this. I don't think you're undisciplined. No, you're not undisciplined. You're unclear. Discipline for men is a bit of a misnomer. So I want to take you back to a period of my life. For a long time, for those of you who don't know a bit of my backstory, if you want to listen to that, I don't know, go back to some of the early episodes. Episode 1, when I introduced myself, as a fair whack of it in there, I think. I was a personal trainer. Got out of university, physical education degree, got into working with people as a personal trainer after that. This is back in 2004, 2005, 2005. And this was the time, certainly in New Zealand, where to become a personal trainer, you did a degree, essentially, not just some 6-week course, and then away you go. And the reason I say that slightly snarky remark is because I did 5 years of university. I did a lot of learning and education, and I learned a lot about the body and about sports science, exercise prescription, management, etc. And I very soon and quickly learned that really what I was doing was working with not these problems that were kind of presented in textbooks or even in labs that we would do, but with humans. And so I very soon learned that the real work that I'm doing here is human behavior. And that was challenging because I could, have someone come to me, and often it was men, and this is kind of the long story of what got me into men's work was, really looking after 10 years of doing that. Holy shit, the main people I work with are men. Same problems all the time. Physically, they're not where they want to be. Mentally, they're not where they want to be. And when I say they, I mean we. And if you want to do something about it, where the fuck do you start? Like just in the realm of the physical and fitness and nutrition and being physically healthy, there is so much scope that you can turn to, right? And everywhere along the spectrum, from one end to the other, all the way through the middle for the most part, experts can't agree. So how the fuck does the average dude learn where to go? But then what was often going on at the level of the physical was being driven by something on the mental and emotional. And that was the work that I realized I had to tap into. But before I tapped into that, I was confronted with potentially writing the perfect thing for this person in front of me. Here's what you need in the world of the physical. And then they wouldn't necessarily do it, even though they might have been paying me money, sometimes a lot of money. They wouldn't do it. And so there's this thought that I remember having, very simply, very obviously to start with, and that was this. Why won't these people just be more disciplined, right? And by extension, why won't they just do the work? Why won't they just do the things that I gave them? And the thing about that question is, it's a great question. Why won't they just be more disciplined? Why can't I just be more disciplined? But the thing about a question like that is, for a while, I wasn't so much asking the question, because asking the question invites exploring the answer. I was more just saying it as a statement out of frustration, more like a wish, right? I wish these people would be more disciplined. And guess where that got me? Fucking nowhere. When I finally got deeply curious about the question, it invited me into action. It invited me to look at the behaviors, the sabotages, the excuses, the rationalizations, the justifications, all the shit that pops up in the way of what we say we want, and the actions to actually create that. Right. And so when I looked at that, what did I see? Shit. What did I see? Here's a quick one: that discipline, or the idea of the lack of it, is usually a lack of clarity as opposed to a lack of discipline, right? What it really says is, I'm not clear on the meaningful reasons as to why I should apply myself to these things. And so we don't. And we call it ill discipline, right? So my clients, they're not doing the work. They're not applying themselves to the things. They're just not disciplined. Actually, they're not clear on the meaningful reasons why to do the exercise, why to apply themselves to the interventions that we've created and prescribed. And so discipline isn't so much the kind of berating yourself into self-hatred, that like you're a piece of shit style approach that so many of the 75 hard Jocko Wilkins Goggins types will have you believe, right? Just be more disciplined, you weak, pathetic fucking loser. Challenge yourself to the world's fucking hardest things. Because by definition, that style of discipline, it wrestles with itself. Right? The just suck it up and do really hard shit approach tends to be more a way of gaining a sense of control when the world around you is outside of your control. And so what it often speaks to is a lack of groundedness to be okay with the nuance of life, right? It doubles down on attempting to strangle life. And it's so constrictive, but it has this other side of it, this other side to it, right? Because the idea with strangling life, or attempting to, is by being so in control of one's life. And it can work wonders. And for some people, and for some times and periods in their life, it can work wonders. But then there's often this flip, right? While motivations are strong, away I go. Whilst I'm seeing feedback and results, away I go. But then for most men, it wanes. And so does the esteem, right? It comes crashing back down to earth with a loud whack. Because often all that mode ends up doing is portraying another version of something unattainable for most men to measure ourselves against. Right? Because if I can't be that level of discipline, that level of execution to hard shit, I measure myself against that and I feel inferior and useless and incompetent relative to that kind of hyper-masculine dude, or that hyper-masculine version of who I think I need to be, quote, disciplined. And so what it does is it further beats down on the internalized idea that we have that says, see, I'm just not disciplined, right? Because these guys over here, they're disciplined. Now, consider that for a moment, if that resonates with you at all. Do you have a pattern of being very hard on yourself? Do you have a pattern of thinking, I need to be able to do this, I should be able to do this, and this pattern of setting very high expectations for yourself that you don't seem to meet very well? And what that sends you into is a bit of self-judgment, often self-hatred, certainly beating on yourself to loop on it again, but I should be better. And so we go again and we double down on those super high expectations. I should just be more disciplined. And all that shooting all over the place doesn't get us anywhere. Instead, real discipline is about self-inquiry, understanding the purpose and the meaning for you in certain actions and behaviors and courses of action. And with that, what drives you? Sometimes discipline is simply not having the tools in one moment. 1 minute you can get to the gym and the next you can't. Does that make you disciplined or not? It might mean that in that moment you don't have the tools. Maybe you need to reconnect to the reasons why the actions you want, right, the actions that you want to have consistency in, are meaningful to you, so that you can remind yourself of the reasons to do them. That's motivation 101 in a nutshell. The juice is worth the squeeze. I'm willing to do the work, the squeezing, in order to get to the juice. If the juice isn't worth it, I'm not going to apply myself to it. And I will mask it. I will make it look like, I will label it as lack of discipline and get on that beat myself up train again, which doesn't get us anywhere. In fact, it does. It gets us further away from what we want or what we think we want. Again, inviting clarity. Maybe you need to remind yourself of the power of what not doing those actions does for you. What are the consequences of not doing them? What are the consequences of not going to the gym again and again and again and again and again? What are the consequences of not looking after your body and eating well? What are the consequences of not facing the shit that you've never faced? What are the consequences of not being honest in your relationship and having those conversations? Because the consequences, whilst they might be challenging and uncomfortable and confronting and fucking just can seem like fuck that, why they can be that challenging and uncomfortable to look at. If I don't look at the consequences of the things that aren't working right now, or the things that I'm not applying myself to that I need to, it doesn't mean that those consequences aren't there. It means that I'm choosing to be ignorant to them. I'm choosing to disempower myself. And so looking at them, whilst it can be wildly challenging as described, it also can be extremely motivating and empowering because it arms you now with some information to do something about. And at the very base of it can be a powerful motivator to take action and be consistent in those actions to avoid that potential reality from continuing and expanding. Because, of course, we can look at what the consequences are and then we can expand them out. If I don't do anything, if I don't do the things, 1 month, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, where does that take me? Holy shit, I can't afford to keep paying those prices. A different form of motivation. Now, we've spoken about this in the past, and you can reference a previous podcast episode. I can't remember the number right now, so we'll put it in the show notes where I talk about the nature of purpose, and that will help you understand this a little bit more and a little bit more depth and expansion. But sometimes understanding why what not doing those actions will do for you gives you a powerful motivator to take action and start doing them. And also, here's another idea. Maybe what you need in a moment where you feel like you're not disciplined is you need the accountability of others that will invite you to take action, who can be honest with you, who can invite you into action, into integrity, who can remind you of your commitments, remind you of what you're capable of in the moments that you can't summon it. Because guess what? Those happen. You're a human. And so maybe it's not some narrow view of discipline that you keep beating yourself up and beating yourself over the head with, but a lack of clarity on what is needed in that moment and more broadly in your life. In there, you will find not only the answers to why you haven't been, quote, disciplined, but why you can moving forward and the actual motivation to do the uncomfortable shit. Then you can be that man. You can step into someone who takes actions when needed. First, it might take a bit of clarity seeking, using some different tools and avenues. Because here's one of the things that I want to touch on when it comes to this idea that we often have of I'm not disciplined, I'm not disciplined. Fill in the blank with anything really at the end of, because at the end of I am is something that is identifying us. And so when I say I am not disciplined, I am ill-disciplined, I'm attaching that to part of my identity, to part of who I am. And that is a really fucking hard way to come down on yourself. And it also means that it has to become true. I will go about in my life and I will make that true. See, I'm just not disciplined. See, I'm just not disciplined. I just don't have the discipline. And it keeps giving me a fucking reason to lean on. I get to lean on that. I get to use that until I fucking let it go. And it's not that you're not disciplined. It's that you're perhaps lacking discipline in this moment. Or, to my previous point, perhaps it's that you're lacking clarity in this moment. So one of the things that I want to talk about here when it comes to discipline is 14:30. Let's just do some cutting there. Dan, you just need to slink this together. Cut this bit out. what discipline and stopping can be about. Got you. So when we start to look beyond this narrow version of discipline, what we can often see is I don't do the things, or perhaps I do the things and I stop, right? Things get good. I'm doing them. Maybe I've got some consistency and I'm feeling good, right? And there's motivation because motivation tends to follow action in that kind of situation. And then I stop. Why do I stop? Why do I sabotage? And so let's explore that, right? Because it speaks to the discipline piece. Like, I can be disciplined and then I stop and it's going good. Well, there's a few things that can play into that. One, here's a simple one that a lot of us have never explored, and that is to continue down the path of what discipline might take us to, some kind of result, some kind of achievement, some kind of success. For a lot of us, it's incredibly vulnerable to achieve the thing. If you've never had it, or you've never allowed yourself to have it, or you've never allowed yourself to experience success or have ease, or perhaps more importantly for a lot of us, if you don't truly believe that you deserve those things, success, achievement, whatever it is, that you're not worthy of it, then it feels incredibly challenging to our identity. If I'm to achieve the thing that goes against my identity, that I am a discipline, that I am not good enough, that I don't deserve it. And so it requires a lot of vulnerability to actually allow myself to continue on and claim those things. Because who am I to? It challenges the very essence of what I believe about myself. And it could be taken away. There's often a fear that if I succeed, let's say, if I achieve the thing, then I'm putting myself out there. And that thing could be taken away. That feeling of joy, that feeling of being successful, that feeling of pride, it could be taken away. That's often very high, but at perhaps an unconscious level. And so we will sabotage it and get in the way of it. And then what I can do is I can perpetuate that idea, that belief, that story, that identity that I have of myself, that I am not disciplined. And so again, that's a lack of clarity. No, it's that you're confused. It's that you've got some deeper drivers beneath the system, beneath the surface, that keep cockblocking you and getting in the way of you allowing yourself to achieve the things that you want, to execute on the things that you want, to have success in whatever it is that is the context of what we're talking about. It's an invitation to clarity, always an invitation to clarity. So at this point, what I want to do is I want to give you an example of this kind of clarity in action. And I'm going to use the realm of the physical and fitness and health, because I think it's a really simple, it's very applicable to a lot of us. And it's also a very simple example to kind of connect to, and then we can translate across to any other area in your life. I, for the longest time, as mentioned earlier, was working in the world of health and fitness, but more so as a human. It's a big part of my life for forever and always is. And I remember there was a time there, I don't know, maybe it was back in about 2016 or so, and I was doing a workout with a guy called Kev, but to give the story a bit more context, Big Kev. Kev was a big dude, extremely large, and had a lot of long-term challenges with his weight and his health. And we did a little workout there together, and we got our sweat on and all that kind of stuff. And it was a hot day, and we were outside in the sun. And at some point, I took my shirt off, and Kev knows me anyway, but it was fairly obvious to anyone with two eyeballs in that moment that I was reasonably lean, let's call it. And we finished our workout, and we're sitting there, and Kev says to me, in such a beautiful and curious way, which was beautiful because the curiosity is where this takes us. Curiosity invites clarity. And he said to me, Mike, why do you work out? Why do you train? Like, you're already fit. Look at you. Why do you even need to bother? And what he was really saying to me in that moment was, I can't connect to why you would have the discipline to keep training when you are already fit, because I struggle to have the discipline and I am nowhere near that point. And so it was a great example of why discipline is the misnomer here. And what the point of that question and that exploration is about clarity. And so what I started to share with him was, well, because for me, exercising isn't about getting to a certain look or appearance or shape in my body or measurement or thing on the scale or anything like that. It's such a weak, and when I say weak, I mean it's not a very meaningful motivator. Now, it can be to get us going, right? And that was one of the things that I think was very true for Kev. It was a big motivator for him at that point, but at some point it has to shift away from what I'm avoiding, being overweight, let's say, and uncomfortable and maybe not feeling great about myself, and towards something. And so I said, the thing for me is that training is about my health, but more than my health, it's about my ability to perform. And so I went on to kind of expand this, not in a lecture, but he asked and we had the conversation, ebbed and flowed and back and forth. I said, first of all, it comes down to values. Do I value my health? Do I value my body? Because I see my body as my vehicle for how I experience the world. And so my experience of the world, my life, relationships, everything that I can do, my body is integral to that. And so if I value myself and I value my body, then I need to look after it by default. But I said, I do value my health. Absolutely. But, and this is work that we often look at when we look at values in our work in the Everyday Legends Academy, is that we need to poke and prod and really flush out values, like break them down and really see what's at the base of it. Because I said, for me, health, I went through a period where health was kind of like such a high value for me that I kind of, let's call it, overcompensated. I didn't have the integration and the ability to zoom out and greater perspective on my values. And so I kind of went a bit too hard on that, let's say. And I needed to do that. It was like the pendulum needed to go to one end to kind of recalibrate. I was maybe a little bit more hard out on my exercise, my food and stuff that I needed to be. It wasn't super sustainable or that nourishing, to be honest, to my soul. What I found was my greater value, the thing that held more depth and meaning to me, was performance. And how I equate that is my ability to perform across all areas of my life, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And so training and fitness and working out are so integral to that it's very easy for me to do it. Not all the time. Sometimes I lack the discipline, as I said in the earlier piece of the conversation, because I lack the clarity in that moment. Why do this? Because I get to feel fit, strong, vital. I get to have energy. I get to have mobility. I can do the things in life that are meaningful to me. I can go down the park and run around and kick a footy with my mate. I can go for a hike with Nadia. I can put my daughter on the pack on the back and I can go for a tramp. Because I've connected to what is valuable to me and the meanings that it has for me. And this was, I think, a great insight for Kev, because his idea of discipline and motivation for exercise was narrow at that point. And here was me explaining the clarity on why I do the thing. And therefore, discipline is much easier. And so one of the things that I want to kind of then come back to is this point before on why we might stop and why we might sabotage. I had this question in my Zeus Inner Circle, which is my highest level coaching community. One of the guys, Mark, things are going really well. He's applying himself. Like, holy shit, is he applying himself to some stuff? There's something about when you dive into something with greater buy-in or investment and how much action you put into it. And Mark is definitely a great example of that. And then he's kind of said in the past, what he's noticed is that you might be doing really well with something, having some consistency, which is really the key thing in here. And then he'll stop. Why do I do that? Why do I do that? And that's the thing that I touched on before, is that we'll often do that because some of our old shit gets in the way. I don't deserve to be happy in life, have ease. I have an identity that I'm not disciplined. I have an identity that I'm a fighter, that things have to be hard. And so I keep making things fucking hard. And because often what we're doing when we're applying ourselves to things that are meaningful and that involve growth and challenge is that we have to overcome the challenges, and those take us to new areas. And often those new areas are areas that we haven't been into. And so where we often might stop is at a new edge. I've never been into this territory before. And so it's asking me to level up. It's asking me to let go of those old beliefs and identities. It's asking me to allow myself to have a new level of success, achievement, and so on. It's asking me to recognize that instead of this potentially being a point of I'm not disciplined, but maybe it's a point of I'm so disciplined that I'm now at a whole new level, a whole new edge. And this is a sign of growth and a new limit. And so where perhaps he was stopping in the past was, way back. And we often do that as men. We think we're at our edge and we're so far back from it. So sometimes stopping helps us to kind of collect ourselves together to take that next step, right? And so in that moment, perhaps of like things are going well and I stop, instead of looking back and go, there I am with my old story of I'm not disciplined again. It's I've stopped again. There's the invitation to clarity. Why am I stopping in this moment? Is it because I'm venturing into new territory now and I need to check my identity and how I feel about myself and what I'm capable of doing and what it means for me and who I am by stepping into this new realm, a new edge, a new limit? But it's not a lack of discipline per se. It's a lack of clarity on what you're experiencing and how to navigate it. And as I said before, sometimes, therefore, discipline is simply not having the tools in a moment. One moment you can do the thing, one moment you can't. Right? Maybe it's not about the gym anymore. Maybe it's about this new level of training. Maybe it's not about having a conversation. It's this new level of conversation in your relationship. And so often what then comes in around this idea of discipline is that we as humans tend to have this kind of deeply ingrained mode of following the path of least resistance. It's very human. It's very hardwired in us to keep resources close when you never know. For the longest time as we evolved as humans, you never necessarily knew where the next meal was coming from. We didn't necessarily have a surplus of food. We didn't have ways of storing food. And so we needed to conserve energy. We needed to get a kill. We needed to eat high energy dense food like the fat and the protein in animals. And so part of the thing that got hardwired in us there is to actually conserve energy and take the path of least resistance. Now, of course, we don't live in that state anymore by and large. And so it can be helpful to recognize and acknowledge that those things are still playing out, not to then lean back and use them as a crutch or an excuse, but to understand them so we can choose better and more effectively. And so one of the ways that that will play out for a lot of people, and reflect on this because you might understand and see very quickly where you do this in your life, is that we might chase short-term pleasure, instant gratification, as it might be known. And that can be many things: chasing little hits of dopamine, getting your phone out at any given opportunity, checking social media, just checking maybe if someone's caring enough about you to send you messages. And it can play out in the way of, to the gym exercise, not going to the gym. So sometimes short-term pleasure is simply the absence of short-term pain. You know what? I don't want to go and do that workout. Fuck, that's going to suck balls. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to take the instant gratification, which is a feeling of not having that discomfort. But here's the thing, is that if we are consistently in that mode of avoiding short-term discomfort, it's going to look like, and often be very much sound like in our own narrative, that we're not disciplined. And one of the reasons we're doing that is because we haven't connected to the longer term purpose. All the stuff that I've been talking about before, the clarity of why take the action and how much or where this sits on my values. So back to the idea of, the fitness or a tough conversation. I've got to have that conversation with my partner. It's so much easier not to. Oh, it's so much easier not to have the conversation, is it? How many times have you fucking said that? It might feel easier in that moment not to have it, right? And so there's the instant gratification, so to speak, of avoiding that conversation, avoiding the short-term pain, the short-term discomfort, the short-term work. But it is never easier in the long run. And so when we consistently get into that mode of avoiding short-term pain and work, we end up in longer-term pain, longer-term discomfort. And that's where a lot of men find themselves in this work when they come to me, when we start venturing into the work of the Everyday Legends Academy, is that they've realized that there's a bunch of shit that they haven't done, that they've chosen not to do, short-term pieces of discomfort and hard work and quote pain. And so they're ending up and then starting to really feel and acknowledge and sit with these kind of longer term discomforts that they have in order to create longer term pleasure and purpose in our life. There are moments, not all the time, there are moments when we have to execute on short term discomfort and pain at work, and how we will be able to more readily and easily apply ourselves to those moments is to connect clarity to why. Where does this take me? That's the juice. Understanding the juice, so I'm willing to do the squeeze. And so sometimes we haven't brought into where that short term or connected to or got clarity on or seek feedback and support on where that short term discomfort and work and pain may take us. And so when we're not connected to that, we avoid it. We choose short term pleasure or the avoidance of short term pain. And that takes us to a place that is not meaningful, that is frustrating, that looks like I'm not disciplined, where in fact, yes, but actually you're not clear. And so when it comes to this idea of discipline, really what we're talking about is clarity. Oftentimes what sits at the base of this is our deepest shit, our unprocessed trauma or events from our past that lead to beliefs that we hold about ourselves that prevent us doing things that are good for us. If you do not believe that you deserve happiness, success, ease, etc., anything that comes in there, you won't do the things. You won't apply yourself to the things that create success and ease and so on because you don't believe that you deserve them. So you will sabotage. You will look for any reason or justification. If you think that you have to fight, that you have to struggle, that life has to be hard, you will keep choosing that. And you will make life hard for yourself. And so when things get hard or potentially start to get easy, you'll make them hard again. It becomes part of your identity. And so we think often discipline is just about knowing the strategy and then having the discipline and applying ourselves to it. And if we can't, then we're not disciplined, right? It's like some people were blessed with the fucking discipline stick and some people weren't. And hopefully one day along the line, I'm going to go to sleep and in the night, the discipline fairy will come and sprinkle magical discipline dust on me. And I'll wake up in the morning, oofa, I'll be disciplined. But it doesn't work like that. And I've spoken about this in podcasts before, and I'll share it here again. And I'll use health and fitness again because it's such a simple example to connect to and to start to extrapolate out to different areas in your life. Just knowing the strategy is never enough. Everyone knows the strategy for being fit and healthy. Broadly speaking, exercise regularly, eat well, manage the amount of calories you eat, roughly relative to the amount that you output, get some rest. That's it. There's a lot of nuance in there, but that's the gist. Let's call that the 80%. Why the fuck aren't people doing it if everyone knows it? Because it's more than just the strategy. We have to understand our drivers and stories that we hold about ourselves beneath the surface. And again, if I don't believe that I deserve to feel fit and healthy and love myself, if I don't believe that I'm good enough, I'll never apply myself to the things that allow myself to actually embody that. And so it's never the strategy, it's the beliefs that we hold beneath it. That's the clarity piece that we're being asked to here. Why apply myself to these things? And why haven't I in the past? Why haven't I in the past? Oh, because I have a horrible relationship with myself. My internal narrative is so hard on myself. I tend to think of myself as a piece of shit, especially when I do anything wrong. I'm always in judgment and shaming myself. That will never allow yourself to do things that are good for you. Self-hatred and self-loathing and beating yourself up can never lead you to a place of self-love and self-respect and self-expansion. And so while that example might have been around fitness, you can apply that anywhere. This doing some fucking work, having the conversations, whatever it may be. And so what happens for a lot of guys is we look at life in this kind of model of discipline. And I want to give you a really quick example. Again, I've spoken about this on previous podcasts, but I see this in many men, and you might be able to equate your life to this as well. It's like our life is this very complex jigsaw puzzle. Let's call it a 1 million piece jigsaw puzzle. There's lots of pieces. As men, we've often learnt this idea of what the picture is. The idea that's been passed on to us by our family, our community, our culture. Here's what a good life and a good man is. These are the measures of it. At the center of that is often this idea and your ability to provide, protect, and procreate, create muscles and strength and toughness and status and power and money and shiny things, and a big dick and sexual prowess. They're somewhat hollow. And so what we start to see is I'm building out a life that I'm not truly clear on. I've got the idea of what the picture is, but it's not my picture. And so one, we don't have the clarity on what we're building. Into these examples that I've been speaking about, I don't have the clarity on where I'm going and what is meaningful to me. It's blurry. It's fucking disjointed. It's not quite there. It's out of focus. It's got holes in it. And when I look at the table, I'm missing so many of the pieces. But what I've learned is how to be busy, how to look productive, how to tick off achievements. I've learned to build a jigsaw puzzle. I've learned to be very good at going to the box, pulling out a piece, taking action, finding a place for it. But it's all very narrow focus. If I want to truly build this puzzle that is my life, what I need to do is I need to zoom out. First of all, I need to get clear on the picture, super clear for me, have genuine ownership on what I'm building for my life and why. And I need all of the pieces. If someone's giving me the best strategy in the world to put a jigsaw puzzle together, but I don't have a clear picture and I don't have the pieces, what is the fucking point? I'm not going to do it effectively, and I'm going to keep telling myself that I'm not disciplined. No, I'm not clear. I need to get clarity in the picture, and I need the pieces. In that comes motivation. The juice is worth the squeeze. In that comes consistency. I can now consistently apply myself to the actions that help me build out this jigsaw puzzle, be it your life or one part of it, like a relationship or your health and fitness, to use that common example through this conversation. And that right there, understanding what is valuable to you, your values, what is meaningful to you, right? We might look at this as in the sense of purpose, understanding your why, will then allow us to be consistent. And those are the pieces that this very simple and narrow view of discipline that we've had do not incorporate. We must incorporate those when it comes to being disciplined. There's work involved in that. That could look like short-term work. Then connect to why. Why get clarity on all of this stuff? Oh, because it will allow me to shed that fucking identity that I've had that I'm not disciplined. It will allow me to have a lot more ease in my life. It will allow me to achieve the things that I want to achieve, or even get clear on what I do want to achieve and why. So here's something that I want to share as a bit of a story to close this out. And I've shared plenty of my past, again, in previous podcasts. One of those pieces was that, as a young man, as a teenager, I was a very talented rugby player, athlete, rugby in particular. And I kind of had this idea in my head that I was going to be a professional rugby player. And when I say kind of, that's the point, really. I was supported in that, I was encouraged into it, but I didn't really understand what it would require of me. Not really. Because when I left home, just after I turned 18 and went to university in a different city, holy shit, I had all this freedom. I had all my mates. I had a drinking age that was aligned with my age. And I stacked my portfolio of good times. Just that was the focus. What I valued very, very highly was getting shit-faced and fucking around with my mates. What I didn't value more than that was the path to excellence, let's call it, in my chosen sport, and the path towards becoming a professional rugby player. And so I didn't execute on the training and the skills that I could have. I kind of wanted to be a professional, right? I did, but I didn't really. And I don't think I ever truly allowed myself to believe that I was good enough to be it. It was just easier to be the guy with talent than to really fucking apply myself to it. And so I didn't value it enough to apply myself to it. I trained to maybe 80 to 85%, maybe, of what I could have, that would have allowed me to take those next steps. And also to that earlier point, there's a little bit of that, and what if I did really apply myself to it and I achieved that? Fuck, and if I don't think I'm good enough for it, well, then that could be taken away at any moment. That could be taken away. And this matters. It plays a part. And so part of what was happening for me there is I wasn't clear. And that wasn't all entirely up to me. How could it be? Some of those finer skills and understanding clarity and drive and motivation and discipline and consistency weren't facilitated in me and impressed upon me to a level that they could have, that would have got me there. Right. And so this is where understanding some of these key differences. Motivation is different to discipline in the way that we've looked at it, but it's all about clarity. So again, I'll reference the podcast episode that I've done on understanding purpose, because that really is motivation in a nutshell to the story that I shared with Big Kev. I can be motivated, broadly speaking, in my life to exercise and look after my health because it's fucking meaningful to me. I value my health and my performance, my ability to perform across all areas of my life, mentally, emotionally, physically. And so it's easier for me to train broadly. In a moment, it can be very challenging because I don't have an element of clarity in that moment of where this exercise, this training session takes me. And so sometimes I'm invited into that clarity. Sometimes, as I said before, I need the accountability. There's different tools that I need to call on. And that's really all the pieces of the puzzle of this thing that we have called discipline. Clarity, consistency, understanding your drivers, what motivates you, i.e., what your values are and what is meaningful to you. And now, this is a big chunk of the work that we do. In my coaching, I see guys in the Development Academy, in Everyday Legends Academy, as well as now the Zeus Inner Circle, where shit gets so real in there, right? When it comes down to this idea of discipline, because there's so much buy-in for them. There's so much in it that they apply themselves. Applying themselves to stuff that they want and need. I see this so strong because they are clearer on why. And I also see some men, a lot in the world, and some men who come into the work who struggle to apply themselves. And not because they're lazy, not because they are, lack discipline or are ill-disciplined, but because they are not clear on why to do it. They haven't yet got that clarity. And so we'll facilitate that and we'll work on that. But for some, it's because their shit is too much for them to face. The stuff that sits beneath how I identify, how I see myself, how I view myself, what I think about myself is too much for them to face. And so it beats them down and it beats them down and it beats them down. So again, it's not discipline. It's a lack of clarity. What they are unclear on is who they are clinging on to being by staying stuck, and to the idea of what moving past it will ask of them. This is something I see in so many men who courageously reach out to me. We build up the work to change, for growth, for something different, to be this giant mountain, an unattainable mountain. The stories that we create in our head about the mountain. And it becomes, quote, easier to not do it. It becomes easier to talk ourselves out of taking on a mountain. But again, that isn't a lack of discipline, it's a lack of clarity. The mountain isn't that big or difficult. The mountain is not as big as you make it. You've just made it seem that way in your head. You need clarity. You need guidance. You need different eyes. Sometimes clarity comes from different sets of eyes because we can be so in our shit, we can't see it. It's so in front of us. We can't zoom out and see. You step around this way, man. What you need clarity on is the mountain in front of you. And one of those pieces is that you do not need to climb it alone. Clarity on the most effective ways to climb the mountain. I just watched the new Nicolas Cage movie, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. I really enjoyed it. And there's a point in it where Nicolas Cage's character and Pedro Pascal's character are on acid and they're running away from people that they think are chasing them. They're not. And they're in front of this wall. It's a big wall. One of them manages to climb up there and he's trying to get the other one up and I can't make it. Go on without me. And then when we zoom out, we see that the wall is like 2.5-3 meters wide and they just need to walk around it. But they couldn't see that because of where they were aiming. And sometimes we need clarity on the most effective way to climb that fucking wall or the mountain. And here is one simple path to that, and that is this. One step. You start the mountain with one step, followed by another, and you can take one step. Plus, the fastest way to short track discipline is to outsource some to accountability, to support, to healthy challenge, and to activating your natural competitiveness in an environment of men all climbing mountains too. And this, in a nutshell, is a lot of the work that we do inside Everyday Legends Academy and the Development Academy. Uncovering who you want to be, what you value, what you want your life to be, what is meaningful to you, getting that clarity, and then getting clarity on understanding and moving past why you haven't been this man in the past. it cannot be overstated how impactful this piece is. We must understand that if we're going to be able to move past the blocks. And then practical, safe, supportive accountability and challenge and action to become that man and continually become who you are capable of becoming. So, if this sounds good, if all of this resonates with you, then I invite you to take the quite possibly uncomfortable action and ask me, courageous action, and ask me about how that might be the answer for you, not just now in the mountain that you see in front of you, but to be able to take on future mountains, because that's how this works. And let's bring clarity for you. Follow any of the links, send me a DM, book in a call, and let's have a conversation and get you on the mountain and climbing. That's been our show. I trust you'll get something from this. Please share this with the men in your life. Like, subscribe, leave us a review, all those things. To clarity and beyond, and to cheesiness. See you soon. You've been listening to the Everyday Legends podcast, the show that is dedicated to championing everyday men and supporting you in getting more from life, love, and the everyday. If this podcast has benefited you, if you enjoyed this, then my request, my invitation is to share this with a man that you think will also benefit from this and enjoy this. Remember, please, wherever you find your podcast, to like us, subscribe to us, click download first, leave us a review. All those things both make sure you get all the updates when they come in, and it supports us in getting this podcast in front of more everyday men that could use it. Until next time, I've been Mike Campbell. Remember to build that legendary integrity. And remember, everyday men, we thrive when we are championed, when we are supported, when we are appreciated and recognized for who we choose to be in the world. Here is my invitation to both show up and be that everyday legend, and to continue to champion the everyday men in your life.